welcome to episode 69 of the Freo Big Footy podcast. This week we'll go back and have a look at the result versus North Melbourne, where Fremantle started brightly but fell away to record an 11-point loss and a rare back-to-back loss for Fremantle this season. We'll have a look at the Waffle news, some contract re-signings during the week, and then finish by having a look at the preview against Melbourne. Joining us this week is our usual resident Victorian expert, Seppo. How are you, mate?
I'm good, Centurions, and last few weeks to go, and geez, we've got a time finished now to secure top spot.
Yeah, last week Fremantle went down 14 goals, 10-94 to 12-11-83, and an 11-point loss, and certainly didn't look like it was going to be that result after the first quarter, Seppo, where Fremantle, like the Saints game the week before, came out of the blocks beautifully and kicking straight, and just sort of the wheels fell off after the quarter time.
Yeah, it was a great start, but probably even missed a couple of chances there. I think with I know that kicking was pretty good right up until the last couple of points that we missed, but yeah, we certainly didn't do ourselves any favour with letting North back into the game that easily after a good start. And I think one of those big records that we've had when we've kicked 12 goals, we've won 42 straight, I think came to an end with the last flurry of goals from North in that start of that last quarter, really making it hard for us to hold off. But there was some good little bits out of the game. It's hard to pick a lot of positives out, but I think Walters was up and about, and Griffin showed that he's doing okay, and Sandilands played a very decent game as well, and Hill was dominating as he always, and Mundy probably had a nice solid game as well. So it's not all doom and gloom, and thank God Fife got off with his report that was thrown out that probably warranted the free kick, and that was it.
Yeah, the other probably pleasing sign was Lee Spur, who had another cracking game against Lindsay Thomas as well, Seppo, and he's probably been, even in the game earlier this year, I don't think, Thomas has sort of been anywhere near it when Spurs played on him, so he's continued his good form there. But as you said, it's probably, I think more of this game was not so much about the regulars that we expect, but probably the fringe players, Seppo, who you would think are trying to fight for his 20 top, final spot, but they just seem to be coming up short on a regular basis. And, I know there's been plenty of talk on there for the last few weeks, but, Mazungu's been certainly, you can see why he's been struggling to get a game. And last week, he's just decision-making at times and, composure under pressure just let him down continually, and particularly in that fourth quarter where he had a chance in the first 30 seconds of the quarter to kick a goal and he sort of rushed it. And then later in the quarter got a free kick and tried to play on with the guy standing right there and got tackled and turned over, and I think they went down to the other end as well. So, he's probably struggling to keep his spot. I mean, the ball, it's a bit hard when you only came on in the last quarter, and unfortunately, we'll get to him probably a little bit more on the re-signing, Seppo, but earlier this season, Ross Lyon was talking about, being down in the sort of desolate corner with, Ballas down there, and unfortunately for Crozier, I don't think it's his spot playing in that forward pocket. I think he's definitely better as a high half forward, but just hasn't been able to get himself, even if it's not so much necessarily in the game, but just hasn't been able to have an impact when he's not getting the ball either, unfortunately, for the last few weeks.
You'd like it for a player like Crozier, if he's not getting involved too much, to at least hit the scoreboard with a couple of touches if they are going to be under 10, but he hasn't seemed to do that and making it a bit hard. He does have a lovely kick on him, but at least the with the other people we've had chip in for goals coming out of our midfield. But what you're saying earlier, I could definitely see with the game plan that we're trying to play, constantly moving the ball on quickly, don't allow North to set up and try to catch their tools out back, as we were spreading quite well for a short period of time, and you could see a couple of bit of decision making when it didn't go our way with some of the people handballing to people that had an opposition right on their hammer and not looking straight away, and you could see they wanted to move the ball quickly but didn't come off in certain passages of play, and sometimes it did, and we got some nice goals out of it, but some shocking turnovers that North just seemed to capitalise on. And I think some of their big units like Ben Brown and Goldstein and even Waite, who doesn't have good games, but he bobbed up and kicked 3. So it's a shame to see that some really bad players have some great games against us once again.
Yeah, early on, I think Nahas kicked the first one, and he always only seems to have a career game against us every time he plays. But every time he sort of always manages to kick a few. And it did have a lot of similarities to the St Kilda game where we did get out of the blocks early, and then we sort of try to, sort of tease us a bit there, Seppo, and then they sort of just try to control it. And where Saints didn't have the ability to hurt us, North Melbourne came back and got back into the game slowly but surely and did manage to do it. The other player who's probably, still struggling to have an impact in the second half of the season, and is Daniel Pearce. And the reality is that we need, 12 possessions for him in a whole game is not going to be enough if we're going to be any chance of doing any sort of damage in September, Seppo. We need his outside run, and we're just not getting enough from him at the moment.
Yeah, even his disposal efficiency, 50%, not that good that you're okay if a guy like Subin and all that are pushing the ball forward and making us ground. But I think Daniel Pearce needs to work a bit harder on it, and he hasn't been dropped really for form since he's come to the club and got that impressive run of continuous games. But there's a couple around there all around him that didn't do well on the day and probably need a bit of a kick up the bum to get going and help us deliver those forward 50s and get better results.
Yeah, I mean, we had probably 7 or 8 players who had 10 possessions or less, Seppo, and that's just not enough. You're going to expect that from Dawson and maybe the sub, but you just need a little bit more from those other guys out there. And even though some of them are our big guys, I mean, the week before McFarlane had a lot of it, but Sheridan, who does provide that run for us off half back, only had 10 as well. And I know that opposition teams will definitely try and bring his opponent back into that back pocket to sort of take away his dash. And it'll be interesting to see this week, and we'll get to the team shortly, Seppo, whether they look to. I know I briefly mentioned it last week, but whether they look to bring Clancy back in to give us that bit more drive. And I noticed that Duffield has also been sort of named this week, and although his probably defense is not as good as it was in the past, he's certainly one of our better users by foot when he does get the ball.
That's probably what we're looking for in this game, and I think probably even just the forward line set up without Pav, a bit of leadership probably would have helped in that last quarter, just settle a bit. And I know Alex Pearce has been going okay up front there, but he's still not as good as Pav. And we've tried Taberner up there and some others. We've had the combination out there have been really good, but at the moment I think Fife did okay in stints when he did go forward, but probably when he was out there, we weren't winning the ball enough to actually utilise him one out when he was there, because you could see it was almost like a rest. It wasn't really like a lethal forward up front. So the idea was nice, but I think we lose too much by taking Fife out of the midfield, and we need someone like Pav back up there to help dominate those forward entries when we do get them, because we did win the inside 50s by almost 10. So it was a real odd thing to see us fall that short with such dominance of the inside 50s.
Yeah, it's just we just haven't, as you said, managed to be able to have anyone else who can be an effective target inside 50. I know that Pearce took a very good mark early in the first quarter, but then sort of just wasn't able to present enough after that. And and it's interesting that Taberner has been named this week, and depending upon obviously how Pav pulls up and whether he does pass his fitness test this week, it'd be interesting to see whether they do give Taberner another option. And what did you think of the back line, Seppo, where this is probably the first time all year where we've had McFarlane, Johnson, and Dawson back there, as opposed to where we had, like at times, Johnson, McFarlane, and Pearce. Do you think it works better having Dawson back there, or do you think it would be better having Pearce back there and then bringing Taberner back up forward?
There's a combination there that I liked during the game, but I think what happened was the smalls of North. I think when Boomer got a lot of the goals, I think we probably had maybe a bit too tall. I don't know. It kind of suited having their big units like Goldstein, Waite, and Ben Brown there. The three tools seemed to cover them quite well, and McFarlane was moving pretty smoothly and even got a bit of a rebound and dash out of him, but can't afford to do that all the time. And I like those three. It sort of seemed to hold up structure-wise, but maybe there's a bit of flexibility if we don't have Dawson there that Alex Pearce could go back, but you just wonder what the best combination is leading into the finals, and it all depends on the matchups as well, who's there. But Lee Spur was a great, like you said before, a great shutdown role, and Sutcliffe probably let Boomer get out a bit too much when the ball spilt and crumbed out. But all in all, I think it's great to have McFarlane and Johnson and Dawson all out there. But I suppose they're all sort of building up form and managing it at the right time of the year.
Yeah, probably since about round 13 or 14, Seppo, we've sort of talked about like Fremantle sort of just continuing just to motor along, pick up bank the 4 points and sort of build up towards form. And we're sort of getting closer and closer towards the end, and yet we're only sort of seeing glimpses of quarters at best, or maybe a quarter and a half. So, with the next two games, and as you said, arguably we're the top spot or second on the ladder, is the importance of that may or may not be a massive thing, because at the end of the day you're still going to get the same result of two home finals, but you definitely want to be seeing this week a more closer to four-quarter performance than what we've been seeing so far.
Definitely. Now, who do you think won the All-Australian Ruckman battle of Goldstein and Sandilands?
Well, it was an interesting battle, and Sandilands certainly looked good early and took him down there, and I think for the majority of the day, Sandilands probably certainly had the ascendancy in the ruck, and he certainly had, he was on a par with Goldstein around the ground for the majority of the game. I mean, Goldstein probably, they both kicked a couple of goals each. And I suppose it's whether you argue Goldstein's was probably, Goldstein kicked one of them at the very death row. But I would think that probably Sandland certainly didn't do himself any, he didn't sort of hurt his chances by any stretch of the imagination. But, I just think, wouldn't be surprised at all if, even though Sandilands, I think, is probably the most important ruckman, and you speak to any players and they say the teams work more around him, but I wouldn't be surprised at all if it ended up going Goldstein and probably even Nat Nui. The guys who are on that panel seem to love him to death, so wouldn't be surprised at all if he does, and particularly because West Coast were expected to be rubbish this year, and the fact they've come off and arguably near the top of the ladder, wouldn't be surprised at all if he gets the nod over Sandilands either.
It's hard to see someone with Aaron Sandilands' number. If you replace his name and put anyone else's name in there, they're like, wow, these stats are amazing. I think it's now the norm now. So they're expecting him to break his ceiling and go even higher. But 43 hit-outs. Well, I suppose you combine that with Griffin giving a chop out. I don't know if anyone else really went in the ruck against Sandilands, Griffin, other than Goldstein, because I can't see a hit out recorded against anyone else's name other than Goldstein. So he seemed to shoulder most of the load there, or the other guys didn't even get near it. But we had a couple of guys like Fife and Mundy come third up that seemed to help us push the ball out a couple of times. So we are not all reliant on the big man Sandy, but I'd love to see him get some recognition, at least with the All-Australian squad, and maybe even another one if he has another two dominant games to end the year. And
I don't think anyone would grudge him getting it, but I think the fact that Goldstein does it all on his own as well probably may work in his favour, as opposed to where we've got Griffin or we had Clark earlier in the year. And as you said, in terms of hit outs and all that sort of stuff, he probably just needed maybe kick a couple of more goals and through the year. But as I said, it wouldn't shock me in the least if going through looking at our list, that maybe the only, Fife will be a lock for All-Australian, but after that, Johnson's probably missed too many games. McFarlane may be a chance to get in the squad. But after that, I think, probably the only other ones we might have is possibly Walters, or Mundy's was strong early, and he's still, I wouldn't be surprised if he maybe makes it, or Lockie Neal, but after that, drops off pretty quick, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Any other points you want to bring up from this one, Mark?
No, other than the fact that it's a nasty loss, and it would have been nice to have more comfort going into these last two games, and now it's battled for secure these last few points over the next two.
Yeah, at the end of the day, Seppo, I don't think it's going to, West Coast have certainly got no lay-down misère against Adelaide, who will be fighting for their sort of, final spot. So, there's no guarantee that West Coast are going to go over there and win that game, and if they lose this week and we get the points, then it would be probably no different anyway. But it's probably just more the fact that regardless of the result, you just want to be seeing a little bit better form coming in with only 2 or 3 weeks to go until the end of the season.
Yeah, that's what we want to see.
All right. The other interesting point, Seppo, just before we move on, is what do you think the reason is for, obviously we've seen that spread from Fremantle's midfield early. The ball movement's been quite strong, and then we sort of just tend to Do you think it's a conscious decision that we sort of switch off? Or do you think it's a work ethic or a work rate issue? Uh, what's the, what do you think it is that we just aren't able to sustain it for more than that quarter at this stage?
No, it's interesting. We've the burst has sort of come out in a lot of the games, and might not necessarily be in the first, but we seem to have a quarter where we just go nuts. But it's yeah, I don't know if it's a lot of the guys dropping their heads and just putting too much, and we don't seem to be hitting the rotations as hard. I think our average rotation is probably one of the lowest out of all the sides in the competition. I think regularly see us sort of only get to the 100, 105 mark, maybe a couple more if there's been some injuries or a hot day, but we haven't really been really running it out, and maybe we're holding something back in the tank for the business part of the season of a lot of those guys there. But it is quite interesting just how we can play so well and then so poorly all within one game, because it's reminiscent of early Fremantle back in the 2005 and 6 days, where we used to turn it on and turn it off like that all within one game.
Yeah, and I know there's been a lot of talk about the fact that we haven't kicked 100 points, I think, since round 8 this year when we played North Melbourne. But there's been a number of games where really we've been pretty close as well, Seppo. I mean, you think if they put their foot down to the pedal in that game against the Saints, they would have probably got there. And I mean, there was a couple of performances like Brisbane. We scored 95 against Carlton. So realistically, I think there'd be a few more of those games where we would have got there. And we had a number of games in the wet as well, which I think did have an impact on whether we got there. And then we had a couple of shockers like the Hawthorn game in particular, and even the Richmond one where we were never really looking likely. So, but playing Melbourne this week should be a good opportunity. Last home game of the season, so you'd hope they come out all guns blazing and put on a bit of a performance for us, and start looking towards September, because you'd have to think if we do get the results go our way this week, Seppo, particularly if we get the win and West Coast do not get the points against Adelaide, that there'll be a few guys resting for that Port trip next week.
Mm.
All right. During the week this week, Seppo, as well, we had Peel Thunder eventually get over the top of of the bottom of the table, Perth, with a 14-goal, 16-100 and they only just made the 100 themselves, Seppo, versus 13-9-87 against Perth. And once again, we had the usual suspects doing pretty well, with Ballard getting 34 and getting the sort of BOG out there, and but none of our other players really, I think, stood up and demanded a recall with their performances this week.
Yeah, I think Clancy's one that's probably been showing he's been consistent in there, and I think there was interesting coming out from the game. Blakely's done his ankle and taking it easy, and I think missing this week, and I think Clark copped a fine, or I'm not sure if it was suspension. But,
yeah, it was a suspension this week, and to be perfectly honest with you, he should have probably copped a bit more than what he got. So we might not get much luck at the AFL match review panel, but the Waffle one's a bit different. And I don't know if you saw it, Seppo, but it did give him a pretty good uppercut off the ball. So he's probably lucky to get away with that. But I don't think he would have played this week with a concussion anyway. So
yeah,
it's probably just a bit unfortunate that the two guys who are probably most likely to, or maybe have been in contention, particularly Blakely, unfortunately got an ankle injury this week. But by all accounts, his rehab's gone really well, and he may certainly won't be back this week, but he may get a game next week.
Yeah, certainly they'll want that Peel going into finals, a full squad available, and might be taking one of the best ball users out in Clancy. He might be getting a gig this week, but he's been one that's been knocking on the door as long as with Blakely and Langdon and Weller all having great games over a period. But I think Weller missed out that game, didn't he?
Yeah, he didn't play this week, so yeah.
So hopefully those guys all get back out there and play finals for Peel, because it's really good to get that experience into these young players.
Actually, before we do move on from this one, Seppo, you're probably a bit remiss. Ethan Hughes probably played his best game, I think, as a Peel player, and ended up with 26 touches and kicked a goal as well. And he's slowly but surely gotten better as the season's gone along. So certainly showing a little bit there, and there's a little bit more to work on there. So hopefully he'll continue that form for the next few weeks as well.
Yeah, and I've heard his playing style slightly compared to Ibbotson, so be handy if he's got those type of moves and skills in the bag like Ibo does, and carve his spot out in the halfback.
Yeah, the other one was probably seeing Taberner get 9 marks this week, and he had 17 touches. Only kicked 1-1, but at least was getting get his hands on the ball a little bit more, and taking. I think he had the most marks on the ground. So at least he's presenting well and getting a few marks there, which is pleasing. All right, this week, Seppo, we also had a bit of contract news with two of our younger guns re-signing this week for 2 more years.
Yeah, young Sheridan and Crozier both signed on to all the way to 2017, so locked up for another 2 years. It's great to see. I think it's something we were talking about a couple of weeks ago, just flagging that those two will probably sign on and showing signs that they're being rewarded with a bit of game time, and even form's probably dropped off for both of them quite recently, but at least they've been getting out there, getting experience, saying that they enjoy it, loving it, and we've locked them right up. And I think just looking at the list now, it'd be great to complete the trifecta of young kids and get someone like Alex Pearce signed up to that type of length as well. And you've got great guys like Gray and Apner still there to be signed up out of that 2015 expiring, and then you get to the older guys that will probably play out to the end of the year. But I think Alex Pearce will be next on the train to join the likes of those young guys that just ensure our future for a bit more.
I know the other one that we haven't sort of mentioned there is Zach Clark as well. Seppo, I know that some people aren't big fans of him on the board, but unless you're going to be getting a really, the only reason you could really see him, I don't think we should be getting rid of him, period. But unless you're going to get a Cam McCarthy or someone similar, there's just you've done all the hard work to get him up to that point, and a lot of ruckmen do take a number of years to develop and progress. You do get the occasional ruckman who's younger, like the Brodie Grundys of the world, and and he probably has dropped off a little bit in the second half of the year, but I think he's going to be a crucial player in terms of our squad going forward. With Sandilands only got 1 year left, and Griffin's not a youngster either, so I think it's he's going to be a crucial re-signing for us in terms of our long term as well.
Definitely, you'd want to keep someone like Clark on there, just because you never know what would happen with Sandilands, even though he's signed on till all the way to the end of next year, and Griffin's all the way out to 2017. But I think Clark's quite important to hold on there, and there's probably some other guys there that probably looking at probably not having their contract renewed or making the cut. So I think Clark's one that probably got to keep on there and maybe even extend out a bit further.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see come the end of the season, Seppo, with some of those guys, because a lot of them, as I said, whether those older guys stay on there. I mean, you have to think, unfortunately, Morrow won't be on the list next year. With Sylvia's already gone, obviously, and then Morrow they may re-rookie him, but it's probably just getting to that sort of really difficult call point, and then whether you've got the likes of Crowley, whether he comes back for or whether Crowley's done as well.
And then you've got McFarlane potentially retiring, and there's 3 or 4 list changes right there without even moving anyone else along.
And then they're still going to have to make that decision on Moller as well. So there's definitely got a bit of work to be done between now and the end of the season, particularly if all the talk about all these different players hanging on or coming to Freo next year, in particular, like the looks of Schultz and stuff. So it'll be definitely a very busy, silly season coming up.
I think we'll probably see 1 or 2 key more signings before the end of final series, and then the older blokes will sort themselves out after the season's finished and see how the cards fall. So,
yeah. All right. Once again, we seem to cop another milestone game this week, Seppo. But before we get to that, do you want to do the ins and outs this week?
Yeah, it always seems to be the milestone, and facing Melbourne at home this weekend. Freo's brought in Matthew Pavlich, Langdon, Duffield, Clancy Pearce, Matt Taberner into the squad of 25, with dropping Fife with that leg injury that's going to see him out till hopefully first week of finals. We have him back, and Crozier's been admitted too. Hopefully, young Ed Langdon finally makes his debut. He travelled over here with his squad and was there warming up with them at Etihad, so he's probably next after Weller got his crack to get out there and get amongst it. And moving over to Melbourne, they've made a couple of changes as well, with Angus Brayshaw is rested. Hario Lamumba is out with an ankle, and Chris Dawes is out with an ankle too. And they've brought in a couple of guys, Neville Jetta, Matt Jones, Jake Spencer, Oscar McDonald, Aidan Riley and Rowan Bale into their squad of 25, with, like you mentioned before, Nathan Jones playing his 200th game, which seems to be a weekly occurrence against us. I don't know how it works out, but it always seems to be like that.
Yeah, and probably if I reckon the majority of football fans who aren't Melbourne supporters, so if you put 7 of those photos of those ins up, I reckon most people will struggle to name one or two of them. you know,
Mm.
it's definitely some new players in there, and a bit of a shame that for those people going to Patterson's this week or Domain or that you don't get a chance to see Brayshaw. I think he's one of the up and coming guns of the league, but it'll be as I said, there'll be a few salivating getting the chance to see Jesse Hogan too playing at Domain. And realistically, after watching sort of Melbourne get put to the sword last week by Carlton in the first half, Seppo, anything sort of short of a strong four-quarter performance this week will be considered, not good enough, really.
Yeah, I suppose, and what we're looking at as well is the umpires of Luke Farmer, Dean Margetts, and Nick Brown out there. I'm not sure if it's going to help us, and especially at home. But it's interesting when you have a look at that Melbourne. Those outs are pretty big because Dawes has been good, and Harry O's going to be a bit of a drive for them off halfback. They're not going to have, and like you said before, that Angus Brayshaw was probably one of their better players, best on ground when they beat Geelong good couple of rounds back now, but certainly lost a bit. And I think they've still got a bit of talent out there with Nathan Jones, the Mundy-like midfield mover, and young Hogan, centre half forward, capable of kicking a couple on a day, with McDonald, their defender, and some likes like Howe and Vince, very good players. So they're not void of talent because they've certainly got some out there, but certainly if they put up a performance like they did against Carlton, that they certainly clawed their way back into their game last week. If you actually watched the game or saw the scoreline, it wasn't pretty up until half time, and they sort of made their way back into it. But it'd be quite interesting just to see the approach that Melbourne take with maybe some new faces wanted to try and go their hardest against our team.
Yeah, McDonald's been probably a bit of a revelation for them at full back this year, and you know, arguably probably in the top 5 or 6 full backs, and especially considering the amount of work they're getting down there. And Hogan's probably the same, and I think would be the rising star this year as well, Seppo. So they've got a bit of talent there. It's also interesting to see Viv Mitchie getting a game against his old side, and interesting. I thought he used to be a bit of a ball magnet at Peel, and just unfortunately hasn't been able to get it together at the next level and get a good crack at it. But as you said, the likes of Bernie Vince has been he's been a top player for them this year, and in both a negating role and his ability to get the ball. So it'll be interesting to see who he does play on, whether he locks down on the likes of Mundy or whether he plays on Lockie Neal in that sort of game. Having a look at the other side of it, as usual, Seppo, with the interchange, who who do you like for the ins and outs this week?
Um, Looking at the way it's named, obviously Tommy Sheridan, Zach Dawson, probably want to keep those two from the interchange, and possibly another two might be Ed Langdon and maybe Clancy Pearce. I think we'd probably have enough cover for positions in the field by naming it that way. It probably makes us fix up a couple of those things that we're looking for with that drive out of the back line. And can't see Tabiner. Tabiner's probably cover for Pavlich just in case he doesn't get up from training last session tomorrow. But I'd love to see Clancy Pearce in there and maybe a debutant with Ed Langdon, bit of 26 magic in there. So I think we need to keep Alex Pearce in there, which probably means that Zach Dawson comes in just in case McFarlane or Johnson goes down. But it's I think it's a fight out of De Boer and Clancy and probably even Ed Langdon if he gets the debut for the last one or two spots.
Yeah, well, I think I think with the ball, you know what you're going to get every week, Seppo. You know you're going to get hard at it. You know he's not going to take a backward step. You know you're going to have to sometimes put up with his disposal, letting him down at times, and he's not necessarily always going to make 100% the right decision. But he generally plays within his limitations, and doesn't try to do anything too much. But I think, as you said, it might be an opportunity to see if one of those other players, whether it be Langdon, Duffield, or Pearce. I mean, as I said, the other two you probably know a little bit about, just to see whether they can give us something a little bit different or give us that bit of extra drive off half back. And
I'd much prefer to see someone like Langdon come in against this week against Melbourne and then bring De Boer in for the big hard game against Port in the last round. I think if you were going to split those two guys over the two games, definitely want to see Langdon get the run here. And like you say, you know what you're going to get with De Boer.
yeah, and I mean, you'd have to think the the way it's listed with if Pearce does play, that the only way Taberner will be getting the game, I suppose, is if they decide to rest Pav or Pav doesn't pull up well from training tomorrow. So you'd have to think if that's going to be the case, then Taberner will get the game or get the spot. Otherwise, you may think he'll be lining up again for Peel this week. And they may give Taberner a run the week after and rest Pav went for that Port game, depending on how results go, Seppo.
Yeah, definitely. It'll be interesting ins and outs, especially being obviously the Saturday game the week after. We'll definitely know straight away when the teams are named. None of this third week in a row we've had to look through squads on a Thursday night. It's not exactly exciting, but it's a lot of speculation goes into obviously who comes out of that 25. And 9 times out of 10 it has been out of those first you mentioned, and we haven't gone really to late changes and pulling people right out. So it's looking that way.
Yeah, I mean the other thing as well is with this game this week for Melbourne, they're obviously missing a couple of other players as well, Seppo, who aren't not playing this week, like the likes of Aaron Vandenberg and Dom Tyson, who have also probably been reasonably good players for them this year. So that's also you're probably going to have 4 or 5 of what you'd say would be their best 22 out. So you can start to see, I think Melbourne are playing a number of these guys just to see whether they're list worthy or whether they're going to get the chop at the end of the year. So, when you're looking down that interchange bench, there's a number of players there who are probably playing for their careers as well as guys who, I mean, McDonald's a new player this week, but you've got the likes of Neil Bullen, probably Mitchie even to a degree, and then some of those other ones. So it'll be interesting to see if Spur gets a job on Jeff Garlett again this week, Seppo, after his strong performance on Lindsay Thomas last week as well.
Yeah, I think Garlett's one type of. I think he even probably kicked 1 or 2 when we played Melbourne earlier in the year at the MCG. But Garlett's always the type of player that seems to bob up and cause us damage. So I think Spurs got his hands full with someone like that, and it'll be a nice matchup. And not sure where it leaves Sutcliffe, but it's definitely a task for him there.
Yeah. Any other sort of matchups or anything that you're looking forward to this week with this one, Seppo?
It'd be interesting to see how they're using Bernie Vince, because I think if Fife is out there, they'd obviously want to use him to compete, because they did for a short period of time when we played them earlier in the season. But now that Fife's not going to be out there, it'd be an interesting mix of our midfield group, obviously with maybe Neil, Mundy and Hill, maybe even Barlow gets back in the centre square, and could be a quite interesting midfield battle, because Nathan Jones is a really good midfielder, as well as some of the other Viney and some of the other guys they run through there. Could be quite interesting centre square balance. But you think Sandilands should dominate again, and let's just hope that with these midfield battles that we can dominate and push forward and actually capitalise on any clearances we get.
Yeah, it'd be interesting that they're obviously going to go in with the two ruckmen with both Jake Spencer and Max Gawn in there. So it'd be interesting to see how they, particularly how they line up forward, because you can't, Gawn I don't think played. I didn't see all of last week's game, so you're probably better judge than I am. But I know he did kick one last week, but but he did play the majority of the time forward. But Spencer comes back in this week, so they're obviously going to be trying to run the dual ruck system. So it'll be interesting to see how they go with those two players out there.
They probably have to do that with. I'm just trying to think. The Doors, with him coming out, they probably need a bit more height around the ground as well. So Hogan can't carry the full load up front, so definitely going to need some more, chop out with the forward and ruck in there.
Yeah, and if you look at the likes of, even if that match up with Subban and Cross, they're both pretty two hard nuts, Seppo. So you probably wouldn't ask for a quarter asked or given in that match up either.
Yeah, certainly. 2 players that don't like to give up too much ground and go in hard. And I suppose if you can throw De Boer in there as another one that goes in pretty hard. So it's going to be an interesting battle if we can actually curtail the influence of someone like Hogan that's been kicking a couple of goals, and Garlick keep them too quiet, because I think that's where Melbourne have been getting most of their goals from this year. If you keep Hogan and Garlick quiet, there goes half their scoring power. So I think if we just keep the ball out of our defensive 50 and Johnson and McFarlane don't have to do too much, we're going to be a long way to winning this game, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is that this game, if you said if you don't win this game, you don't deserve certainly top spot, let alone probably arguably even top two. But I think Freo after the last couple of results will be sort of very keen to come out and make a bit of a statement with only a couple of weeks to go before finals. But as I said, it's just been one of those seasons where after the first 10 games, we've been waiting for that switch to go on again, Seppo. So let's hope they're, in the horse racing parlance, they're sort of one out and one back at about the 400, ready to make their move.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's amazing, the other games that's obviously going on at that stage. The Adelaide West Coast game is starting just before ours, I believe, and probably going to know the result by the time it starts. And it'll be interesting just to see how the guys take it, because if Adelaide do win, we get that game and a half buffer on the Eagles, and it might just change the way they go and approach, and even just the coaching decisions they might make on the day that we could be up, and they might pull someone like McFarlane and Sandilands off, and someone that might be dominating. If we haven't had an injury, it's man management for the finals when mathematically a result's done and dusted, and nothing comes down to the last game. Could be all done.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, that game and a half lead will be there. As I said, if that result goes our way, and then likewise, we've still got to win that game to get that 6-point break. But I'm sure that Fremantle will be looking to do that. What's your, obviously, been a bit of talk this week, Seppo, about being whether we finish on top. What's your thoughts about whether whether it's even top or second? What's your thoughts on it?
Well, I'd prefer to finish top, just to for the sake of finishing first and having the dominance over playing all this year and staying right up there. I wouldn't want to let our crosstown rivals finishing above us. And I think obviously if it's Hawthorn that's more likely to finish third, I'd rather face someone else like Sydney or Richmond. It's looking like it'd probably be Sydney, but I'd rather face them finish first, and even get the choice for our home jumper on grand final day, providing we do make it, because I'm not sure if we finish second, if we forego the right again, to depending who we come against, to wear white again or something like that might be painful. So I suppose it all depends on who we play and what side of the draw we end up finishing on. But it'd be just nice for us, first time finish top and tick something off in the record books.
So, Seppo, would you rather play Hawthorn in the first week of the finals, or if we do finish top, then and say whether the Eagles win or lose that first week against Hawthorn? I mean, if the Eagles do win and say they played Hawthorn, we would play Hawthorn in the prelim at home?
Yeah, I prefer that.
You prefer that then, as opposed to playing Hawthorn the first week, and if you win, then you'd have potentially a home derby. I mean, if Hawthorn do win the other way, if Hawthorn beat West Coast in the first week, then it would be regardless of whichever way you went, it would be a derby prelim, which would certainly be a massive game, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's it's annoying when you're playing if it was West Coast in the prelim, it sort of removes that home ground advantage that we'd have. But obviously they would have come off a week's break if we did go through and they lost and had to win a second week in a row. So it sort of changes things up a bit, but it'd be amazing if we finish first and they finish second, we both get wins and then fall on either side of the draw and led to a derby grand final. That would just be amazing. And I'm not sure if that's how a lot of people would like it, or if that'd be worst case scenario for a lot of people. But it's I was just playing around with the ladder predictor, and there's still a couple of possibilities to play out, and it always happens every time. You get to the last two games of the year, and the side that you're not expecting to win comes up and wins. So even just having a look at the other games this weekend, North and Bulldogs, North after their dominance, Bulldogs sort of showed they can hang it with the best, I think, against the Eagles for the first half, and they're bringing in some good quality players to take on North. So and it's their home ground too at Etihad Stadium. So I think North's capable of losing to Bulldogs, and there's some all these other games that, Sydney have got to play the Saints, and Saints took it right up to Geelong. Probably even should have won that game. So
yeah,
Sydney have been out of form there, and
even the Port game last week when they beat the Hawks as well. So everyone was sort of tipping Hawthorn to be able to take one of those top two spots and drop the ball on it, so to speak. And as you said, now it opens up. So it does show that every team needs to be on their mettle, and ideally for us, Seppo, that results taken out of our hands a bit next week without having to worry about the result with what happens at Port. All right, any other points you want to bring up this week before we finish up, mate?
No, I just hope that we can get the win, and it's going to be a nice, comfortable watching on the couch or down at the pub on Sunday for me, and make it an enjoyable experience for all those going there. I'm watching the last home game of the home and away season for the guys at Subiaco on Sunday, and let's just hope that if young Langdon does get the debut gig spot, comes off the green vest, can make an impact and get a bit of a taste for it. So I'm going to throw in my tips and going to say that we're going to win by a straight 5-goal margin and 30 points.
All right. I'm going to try and be a little bit more optimistic. I'm going to go for 42 this week, Seppo. And I think we're going to kick 17 goals. So, but the weather looks like it's going to be clearing early Sunday morning. There is heavy rain scheduled for Saturday, but it looks like it'll be clearing by the time the game starts. So I'm looking for us. I think particularly if Pav plays, I think we can get 17. If he doesn't, probably more like the 13, 14 goal mark maybe. So, but yeah, we'll certainly be looking for a bit more than the quarter and a half that we've been getting in the last few weeks. All right. Thanks again for joining us this week, Seppo.
No worries, and thank you, Centurions. A couple more games to go, and we'll be talking finals.
Yeah, it's the season's certainly flying by, and let's hope that we can manage to at least get the McClellan Trophy for the top spot, and then, as you said, look at the finals coming up after that, and hopefully take it the next level this year after 2013. I think it was, yes. So, all right, and thanks again for joining us, listeners, this week, and we will see you again next week, hopefully celebrating a more complete Fremantle performance and another win under our belts. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.